So far, in all the tutorial videos we have covered, we have only covered basically how you can write out expression values directly. So they are so-called literals. For example, so what about number literals? You can see that, for example, in numerical expressions, we write out 15 directly, we write out 4 directly. So there are very specific examples we want to do for division, for example. What about string literals? For example, if you go to string expressions over here, we got this very particular string that we want to print out verbatim. And also we got this particular string, space followed by is followed by space, that's also going to be printed out verbatim to the console. So these are so-called literals. Okay, so now we're going to introduce you to some concept called variables, which is basically like a placeholder for you to store literal values into some placeholder so that you can manipulate based on the names of the placeholder. Okay, so something may not make sense just by listening to me, but I'll illustrate to you. But now, before we tell you how to do variables, I want to show you why variables will be a very important solution to solve something that simply cannot be solved by using literals. Okay, let's go back to your iPad over here. Let me try to illustrate to you. So now we want to illustrate scenarios where if you simply use the literals, either a string, for example, you just got maybe a, over here is a string, or number, or 5 in particular, or you got 2.6. If you only got these construct as we have illustrated so far, it's simply just insufficient. Okay, how? Okay, let's give you one example. Let's say we want to have a console application. Okay, it's a console application. Let's imagine the following execution scenario. Let's say your program is going to prompt the user to say, now enter to me the first number. Okay, the user enters something. And I'll simply say blue, something. And the something can be any number. Okay, I'll get there. And then the second, and after that, your program is going to prompt for the second number over here. And then the user is going to enter a second number over here. And then your program is going to say, going to calculate the average between the two numbers accordingly. Okay, and then that's going to be the blue. So you can see exactly the dependency over here. You can see whatever this result is depends on what this is and what this is. Okay, so now I have a question for you. So now based on what we have learned, without variables, are we able to handle such problems in general? The answer is no. How? Let's say for my program, I only know how to write string and number literals. So the best I can do is to say, I don't know exactly what a user will actually enter. I don't know. I simply don't know. So the best I can do is I can say system.out.println, and then I can simply just give, I have to give a very specific example. I have to say average is plus concatenation. And now, what kind of calculation should I do? That's a problem, right? What kind of calculation? Well, if I simply do, for example, I'll put it here. If I simply say, let me use a better color here. What about blue? If I simply say, let's say 5 divided by, let's say 5 plus 2 divided by 2.0. Do you think this is going to work? Well, I don't think this is going to work because you're assuming that a user is going to enter 5 and 2 so that you're going to calculate 3.5. You're assuming that. But the user may enter any number they like. For example, what if the user simply enters 7 and 2, in which case the correct result should be 4.5. In which case your program is not just going to produce the right result. It's not going to be correct. You can see what the issue is, right? Okay, let me recap what the issue is. This is what's expected. Products from your software. And the expected product is something that your customer require you to actually implement, and this is how you should behave. You cannot make any assumption about what a user will actually enter. It can be any numbers. It can be 5, can be 7, can be 100, it can be 23, 4, 6. Any number, any integer. And the second number can be also any integer. So you can see the combinatorial combinatorial combination of the two numbers is very huge. So that means the average over here is also many possibilities. In which case, you just cannot enumerate all the possible cases in your program. That's not the way to go. So what should we do? Well, we learn about math, right? The way you learn about this in math is as follows. You're going to say the following way. You're going to say, now let me say whatever user enter as a first number, I'm going to call that x. Whatever the user enter as a second number, I'm going to call that y. And then when I calculate the average, rather than working with specific example like a 5 divided by 2 or 7 divided by 2, I'm just going to say, well, I'm going to calculate x divided by y, basically, right? So that's kind of the direction we're heading to. So now in my program over here, I cannot work with literals anymore. I cannot. That's not a good solution. Okay. What I should do somehow is I had to say what the x is. That will be a variable, and also what the y is, and save in these two variables some value over here so that I can always calculate what the xy is divided by y and put it here, x divided by y. Conceptually, that's what we're doing for variables, okay? But in this current video, I'm trying to prepare you for an application like this that we can do ultimately. But for the current video, I want to show you some basics, how you can manipulate variables. Basically, when you manipulate variables, you're really working at a higher level of abstraction. Basically, you're trying to manipulate symbols. Symbols are like x and y or z or any variable names that you can create. I want to show you this first, so you're comfortable with integer variables and also string variables. And then I will show you how you can do user inputs. Okay, that's something we want to gradually build you build your expertise on this particular subject. Okay? So now what I will do is I'll show you how the variables work, but eventually you really want to review this particular page over here to make sure you really understand what the problem is and why simply having literals over here is simply insufficient. Okay, that's something I want you to understand. Keep in mind. Okay, we always want to understand why we are doing things in a particular way before we try to learn exactly how to do it. Okay, it's more important to understand the motivation. Okay, how do we do variables? Okay, let me close all the classes now, and now let me create a new class. Okay. For this current video, let's do variables for storing integers. Okay, so new, and then we say class. Let me say number variables. Okay, number variables, and then choose the main method to be generated, and we say finish. Okay, so now let me show you the syntax over here. Okay. So now let me show you the line first, and then I will show you exactly. I will illustrate on iPad what they really mean. Int, you can type exactly verbatim, all lower cases, is a keyword, reserved word in Java. You got to type verbatim. Int, let me say I equals, and then let's say 5, semicolon. Okay. What does this line mean? Let me explain that in full detail, and then you have to follow the same pattern for this. Okay, so now let's understand this. We have int I equals 5 and semicolon. Okay, that's what we have. Okay, so let's understand this. Let's go to iPad over here. Okay, that's exactly what we have on the Eclipse. And now let's understand this. First of all, this part over here is so-called declaration of a variable. Okay, it's a declaration. And specifically, there are two parts. The I over here is the name of the variable. And over here, the int over here is so-called the type of type, the type of variable. So type is a very important concept that I'll keep emphasizing throughout the course. So what does type mean? you can think in this way. So type simply means allowable values to be stored in this variable. So this is how you can think of it. You can think about I is more like a box over here. It's like a placeholder, and we name it as I. And what can we put inside this box? It depends on what the type is that we are trying to declare I into. Since we say the type of I is simply just int, int actually stands for any integer value. So that means we can store any integer value inside. For example, we can store 2 inside, or we can store 3 inside, or any integer. On the other hand, we cannot store a inside because a is actually a string, not an integer. Okay, so let's get it straight. Okay, so now that's about the declaration part. Okay, again, so we have a declaration over here which has 2 parts. One is about the type, and the other one is about the name of the variable. Okay, that's about declaration. And now we want to see what's the remaining part. So this equal sign over here, I want to really say this is not really mathematical equality. Usually you want to compare to see 5 is equal to 2 or 1 is equal to 1. But we are not doing any comparison over here. Okay, so now this is the proper way to read this. Is assigned to, which means I is declared to be a placeholder for integer values only. And the very first value we try to put in is 5. Okay, so we are trying to assign 5 to be the current value inside this box. Okay, that's something we want you to remember. Okay, or you can call that, this part over here is called initialization. Let me just put it down. Okay, let me have a better color to distinguish. Let's say purple. Okay, this part over here without a semicolon. This part here is so-called initialization. Okay, initialization over here, which means the very initial value we want to assign into this particular box is 5. Okay, since it's a box, so we may want to replace its value for as many times as we like. So let me just write one more line. I will show that in Eclipse. So one more thing to say. Okay, here's the principle. So you can only declare the type of a variable once and no more, only once. Okay, this is number 1. Number 2, you may change the store value in a variable store value in a variable for as many times as you like. Okay, let's illustrate this exactly. Okay, first of all, you can only declare the type of a variable once. So that means over here, okay, let me just write some comments for you. Declare I to be a variable storing integers only with an initial value 5. Okay, that's exactly what we just illustrated. Now we say that you can only declare the same variable just once. If I try to say let's say for example there's another type, so we talk about integer being int over here being any type that's of type that's integer value, right? There's another type, what we're going to focus on the basic ones. There's also another type called string, which means all the words you can print to the console, right? There's the word. If I say string I is equal to, is assigned to, for example, AB. Okay, so now this is illegal because let's look at this. It tells you that duplicate local variable I, which means I has been declared as an integer already. How you cannot redeclare that to be a string? It's simply not allowed. Okay, neither could you actually do something like this. If I say integer I would be, let's say, I just want to say 6. This is also not good. It's also going to complain. There's also an error to say it's already declared, so you cannot redeclare that again. So principle number 1, you can only declare the type of a variable once, only once. Okay. Now what about changing the value? Okay. For example, what I can do is I can say I is assigned to 7. Okay, so you can see that I deliberately pronounce this as I is assigned to. Okay, rather than I equals. Equals is more like a mathematical concept. You want to compare if two numbers are equal. But now here, we're not really comparing equality. We want to say, we want to store this particular value inside this variable. That's what we want to do. Okay, so now, what does this mean? And now I'll show you exactly what happened. Okay, what this means is, so now after this particular line, we store 5 into this box over here, and then we say I is assigned to 7. Okay, so now after this line, if we write another one, we say I is assigned to 7. That means we go to this particular box with this particular name, and then change its value by 7, which means 5 is not stored there anymore. It's going to be stored as 7. Okay, so now let's verify this. Okay, what I want to show you is this. So now what we can do is, so now let's say after this particular line, let's do system.out.println. Okay, i's value is, okay, so we learned about how to mix the string and numbers. So now we can also mix string and variables. So now I can say plus I. Okay, what does this mean? This is a string as we know, and I is actually a variable name. So whenever you refer to a variable name in Java, that means we want to retrieve the value in the variable and then print it out. Okay, so now at the moment, what's really stored in I? Well, it's just 5. And then now watch what's going to happen. If I just try to copy this line verbatim and then paste it over here. So now we know that it's going to say i's value is 5. And now what about here? What should be the output? I's value is, well, the thing is, even though we are trying to print out exactly the same thing, right? But now you can see that this these two lines are completely identical. However, the output depends on the value of a variable. A variable literally means it might change its store value. Okay, and this first line in line number 7, i's value is 5. And this line over here, i's value has been changed to 7, as we just illustrated in this box over here. So that means in this case it's going to say 5, and in this case it's going to say 7. Okay, that's something I want you to notice. Okay. So now if I say right click and I say run as Java application, so we got i's value is 5 and i's value is 7. Okay, I can make it a little bit better. So now system.out.println, so now I can say after initializing i's value to 5. Okay, and then I can definitely fix the typo over here. Storing and initial. Okay, that's let's see over here. Okay, now after this reassignment, after this change of the value for variable, so that's what we have. Okay, now I can say after changing i's value to 7. Okay, and now what's going to happen is, let's see, let's try to execute the program, and then right click and then say run as Java application. Okay, you can see after initializing i's value to 5, the value is 5. And after changing i's value to 7, it's now 7. Okay, hopefully you get it. Okay, so now hopefully you see the idea. Let me show you one more thing, and then I'll go over one challenging example with you, and then that'll be it for this particular video. Okay, so now what I want to do is this. So now let's see, there's another number type that you should know, which we'll talk a little bit more thoroughly in the class, but let's say for this tutorial purpose, so let's introduce another type. So you can also replace the type over here by something called double. Double simply means, double is also a keyword in Java. It's simply just going to store, rather than integer, you can store the numbers with precision, with a decimal point. Okay, let's see how we can do. Okay, I'll show you here. So now I can say double, let's say x is 7.2, and then double y is initialized to be, let's say 3.0. Okay, and now I can say system.out.println. Okay, you can definitely use the variable in whatever way you like, as long as you put the correct value inside the variables. We'll talk about a little bit more constraints, something called casting, a little bit later in the class or later in the tutorial video. For now, we'll just do some very simple stuff. Okay, so now we can say average between x and y. You know what? Let me make I'll just say this first, and that will make it a little bit more interesting. Average between x and y is over here, and then I would say, of course, we're gonna do the parenthesis. So it's gonna be x plus y divided by 2. Okay. So now over here, you can see that over here, the right hand side for the division is an integer. However, the left hand side is actually a double plus a double, right? So it's going to be 7.2 plus 3.0, which is going to be 10.2, right? It's actually not an integer. So that means when you try to do the division, it's going to give you a result with precision, okay? So what we expect to see is 5.1, I suppose, okay? Let's verify this, and I'll show you a variance of this particular one. That'll be more interesting. So now, if I just do run as Java application, okay, you can see that it's simply the average between x and y is 5.1. However, we can improve this further because x and y over here. So what if I look at the output, what's x and what's y? Okay, so now if you do the following, which might be good, but it may not be good enough. If I say based on what we learned before, well, because for now, average between, oh, actually, you know what? Let me do this way here. Average between 7.2 and 3.0 is, okay, this, okay. If I try to execute it, average between 7.2 and 3.0 is 5.1. Yeah, that's pretty good. However, do you spot any problem with this? Thinking this way. This line, this part of the line over here is a string literal, which means unless you modify it, you will always print out the same thing to the console. It would say, always say average between 7.2 and 3.0. Okay? And this calculation over here may not be always the same because it depends on what the values are for x and y. I'll show you what can go wrong. Okay? So now you can see that currently it's simply 7.2 and 3.0, right? Do this with me together, okay? What if I change this into, let's say, 23.5, for example, okay? So now I got 23.5 and y is, let's say, 24.7. Okay, I'm just make some number over here. Okay, so now what's gonna happen here? Okay, now Do you think this line will still make sense? Actually, not really, right? Because x and y are not really x and y that was previously, right? And also, this might be even more confusing. Okay, let me execute the code again. Okay, you can see that average between x and y over here is 24.1, but we don't know what the x and y are, so it's really hard to judge whether this line makes sense or not. But if you look at the next line, over here, because we didn't modify the string literal, it is still going to print out 7.2 and 3.0. And now, average between 7.2 and 3.0 is 24.1. It does not make any sense, does it? Okay? So now, basically what happened was, we only modified the x and y over here, which means accordingly, it is going to modify the result over here, right? Because x and y is going to modify here, so the result for this particular average calculation is also going to be modified, okay? Now, how can we make this better so that we don't have to, every time to say we change x and y, we don't really have to go to here and change that to be whatever x value is and whatever value is. Again, it's 23.5 and also 24.7, right? Of course, if I do the modification, if I do it again, that'll be okay. So this will make sense. But every time if I change x and y, I have to come here and change here and here. That's not very good. I don't want to do that. Okay? A much better way is as follows. Okay? I can say, I will make a comment for you. This is the inflexible. Unflexible, I think. Unflexible solution inflexible, I think. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, inflexible solution. Every time x and y values of x and y above are changed, we have to modify contents of the string literal below, right? Because if you modify x to be something and y to be something else, we also have to modify this and this accordingly, right? So this is not flexible, okay? Inflexible. Let me comment this out. So you put this into comment, so you will just make a notes, okay? So that means it won't be executed anymore. It's not a good solution. A good solution would be this, okay? We want to say, we want to make this part over here and this part here to be depending on the value for the current x and y. Okay, how do we do that? Okay, let me just copy that and I'll show you exactly how you can make the change. Okay, so over here, average between, okay, with a space plus x plus and plus y plus is like that. Okay, so now is again we are mixing numbers, variables, and strings all together using concatenation. So when we refer to a variable, we refer to the value that's currently stored in the variable, right? In this case, it's 23.5 and 24.7. And then concatenate with this string over here, and concatenate with n, concatenate with whatever value is for y, in this case 24.7. And then we'll do this calculation here. It's going to be exactly 23.5 plus 24.7 divided by 2. Okay, and whatever value it is, of course, it's going to be, let me just put it here, 24.1, right, in this case, right? Let's double check. And then if I say that, okay, that's going to be something like this, okay? Good. So now, this is what I want to show you, okay? That's really why I'm really doing this illustration for you. What if, let me comment this out over here, okay? I change x to be, I forgot the original values, but let me just say 3.5 over here, okay, and 4.7. Now, do I need to modify anything in order for this line here to produce meaningful output? The answer is no, Because as soon as I modify x to be 3.5, y to be 4.7, when I try to execute this line at the runtime, x will just be 3.5, y will just be 4.7, and also this will just be the correct calculation, which would be whatever it is. Let's see what it should be. So it should be 8.2, so that should be 4.1, right? That should be what I should get. Okay, let's try. So now if I execute it again, you will see that average between 3.5 and 4.7 is 4.1, right? So really try to see exactly why this over here, where the entire thing is a string literal, is a very, very inflexible solution, because every time if you change the variable value over here, you have to modify the string literals over here as well in order for the output to make sense. But if we simply do a little bit more complicated concatenation over here, it's going to be just work, okay? Just working. So now I really want you to study this, compare these two versions, the inflexible version here and also the general solution over here. So this is general flexible solution. Every time values of x and y above are changed, we need not modify the x and y below, because I'm talking about the x over here and the y over here, because they simply denote the currently stored values in x and y. Because every time when you refer to the name of a variable, it simply refer to their value that they actually stored there. Okay, so please study this example very carefully. Okay, and then compare the two versions, and then we'll get to string variables in the next video.